Hello and welcome to News9. I'm Aditya Raj Kaul and this is in India's interest. Over the last few days, ever since India's airstrikes as part of Operation Sindoor, there's been a lot of speculation about what kind of damage has happened in Pakistan. Not just at the nine different locations of the terror bases of Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Toiba, but also at different air bases and command control centers of the Pakistan Army and the Pakistan Air Force. To bust those claims and to give an unbiased opinion on what has happened there, joining us is John Spencer, Chair of the Urban Warfare Studies at Modern Warfare Institute. Thank you very much, John, for joining us. To begin with, a very simple question. You observed in detail what happened over the last few days, the 4 days so called confrontation between Indian and the Pakistani military. What was your takeaway from that?
I think I had a lot of thoughts, as you knew. I wrote a few articles about it, but I took it as a decisive victory for India, a very impressive, decisive victory, which is really, as I study war around the world, hard for people to see what victory looks like. Clear goals, even though they didn't start this, they ended it. They were attacked. India was attacked, responded, was attacked again, responded again, keeping all within constrained, basically. And I wrote in my article that basically constraining yourself is not weakness. India demonstrated overwhelming military superiority, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But from a general big picture, I overwhelmingly impressed, and both from a strategy and a military capability, but even from the political stance of clear objectives, what was achieved, what wasn't. Because even within India, I've seen people say like, you should have gone for more. You had them. You should have done a lot more. By every measure, for me as a war analyst that studies wars that are going on right now or have happened in the past, India demonstrated a restraint that was powerful, established a new doctrine, and achieved all of its strategic goals in just 4 days. Very impressive.
Well, you say it's a decisive victory. You say it's very impressive. That's all good. But let's delve a little deep into what really happened out there. The nine launch pads that were attacked, Muzaffarabad and also the Lashkar headquarters, Muridke, and finally Bawalpur as well. You think it was a very precision strike on these nine locations? Because India said that India did not want to harm any civilians and initially also did not want to hurt or target any military Pakistani military, either infrastructure or Pakistani military men. What does this say?
So I deal with this a lot, right? Especially within my role of urban warfare, where there are civilians present. And India immediately issued basically information, which is really important for a democracy or even within a war, saying these are the exact targets we targeted, showing their own footage of the sites and why those sites were targeted because they were terror camp, terror headquarters, etc. And the type of munition. So there's many steps in what the target was. It a legitimate target? What was selected based on the terror attack that happened on April 22nd? Legitimate targets. Then what munitions were used? What time was it conducted? All these measures to prevent what we call collateral damage or civilian harm. And India demonstrated that capability to fire at a legitimate target very precisely, with some capabilities of basically a circular probability of error of 1 meter, 3 meters. So the choice of munitions is also very important in how they attack, not just leveling ground and causing civilian harm excessive to what the military goal here was respond to being attacked.
Well, we saw as well immediately after that, when the confrontation began, when immediately after the nine locations were targeted, there was a response from Pakistan. And subsequently, India also launched attacks on different air bases and command control centers and vital installations. And immediately after those attacks, videos started surfacing from common civilians in Pakistan of loud blasts taking place, a huge fireball of smoke also coming up. We subsequently also had videos of runways with huge craters, particularly at Rahim Yar Khan and the Noor Khan Air Base in Rawalpindi. I want you to reflect on this. How was targeted, these areas targeted? What was the idea behind these air bases and vital installations being targeted? A message from India to Pakistani military? to stop confrontation, and also particularly Noor Khan Air Base in Rawalpindi because it comes at the Pakistan Army's headquarters in GHQ Rawalpindi. How significant was that?
So they're all collectively a message, but each target has to be assessed on, okay, why was that target? Was it a launch pad for the drones? Was it a command and control center for the attack? Was it a capability that Pakistan believed was untouchable? Like there are certain radar systems or near a very protected military installation. Every target was chosen for a very important reason, whether it was in basically direct response to what was sent towards India that didn't have the goal that they wanted to achieve with the drones, or the message, which is you've escalated by attacking, as in the Pakistan military escalated by attacking Indian civilian and military sites. So India had to respond and send multiple messages of, one, I'm going to demonstrate to you that I can touch any site that even that you don't think is touchable. So we have to assess every one of those sites. Each one of them, some of them are directly attributable to the capability to launch that drone attack. Some of them are for a demonstration of military superiority, which was done. It's a combination, and a couple of them were necessary, like radars, just to be able to do attack the other systems. Another demonstration with secondary, basically reasons and causes for the those individual attacks. So you have to take it all in a picture. But I think the message was sent very clearly, responding to an attack, demonstrating superiority, and demonstrating deterrence as, look, I have the capability to attack you anywhere I want and the will to do it, right? So this is the precision that was necessary even in some of these sites was immense precision necessary to be able to hit a site and not hit something else, like even in the Lahore airport, to be able to hit a military capability but not a civilian capability. All that's a demonstration of military capability that should have established an immense deterrence factor, and I think it did.
Many people seem to observe, John, that this time around, Indian Air Force in particular has provided a lot of satellite images, a lot of cockpit images as well from those Air Force jets, and obviously ground videos as evidence. Last time around, when in 2019 India struck Balakot, terror camp of Jaish-e-Mohammed, these videos, satellite images were not available. Uh, but from the Pakistani side, there hasn't been any kind of evidence or proof that has come in of so-called strikes that have happened in 26 locations that they claim in India. What does this demonstrate, and how does the international community or observers, very authoritative observers like you, see this?
Yeah, I think it's basically learning the right lessons from war. And nations thinking they can control information or fight the narrative, be the first to truth. Although you have some regimes, and we see here Pakistan wanted to be first to lie, but because of open source intelligence and those military capabilities, like a government learning, like India, and a military capability saying, we'll not only be the first to truth, we'll provide overwhelming evidence. Um, I just saw a story of the New York Times calling out Pakistan. Now, if the New York Times is
Yes.
calling you out for lying, that's a for
Uh,
me, it's interesting,
yes.
which is that it's overwhelming. And in the world of not just military satellites, we have civilian satellites. There are civilian companies like Maxar, things like that, that can provide the imaging. It's much harder to lie today, but for some reason, backing terrorism and trying to lie to your own population, to the international community, seems to be a tactic of certain regimes. But this is a new world. This is a new India. Like you said, learn from its past lessons, learn from the modern battlefield where you're not going to lie and it not be able to be immediately called out through multiple sources of both intelligence and what we call open source intelligence.
We also had these accusations coming in from Pakistan, in particular DGISPR and also the Defense Minister Khwaja Asif, who went all across to the international media and said that we have downed at least 5 Indian Air Force jets. There wasn't any evidence, there wasn't any technical evidence, no images, no photographs, no videos that came out. Uh, you know, there were rumors of Indian pilots being captured. That was finally rubbished by the DGISPR. Why are these allegations coming out? I mean, is this to satisfy the anger of the local domestic population in Pakistan who seem to ask questions to the Pakistan army? Or is it just for international propaganda to show a brave face?
It's usually all of the above, but I think that was clearly for the Pakistan citizens and military itself to try to convince even the military that no, we weren't overwhelmingly unsuccessful. Like we got them some way. And again, if you've shot down that many aircraft, where's the wreckage? Where's the pilot? It's pretty easily, but in some societies, they believe what their government or believe in their military, and that's a part of the pride. So I think it was multi-factor, but it was easily called out, easily, and this is really something too with a kind of a fear society versus what we call a free society. And this is why, again, why I viewed this 4-day operation so impressive is how quick India was to put out information. You don't have to attack the lie. You can just put out the information. And that's what India did with the presser, with all the heads of the different military services, which was impressive. And you can get ahead of that and say, well, okay, if you think this happened, even if it's the international media, because that court of public opinion does matter as well. And I saw, the media saying, this is the report. And the military doesn't have to answer. And there's some kind of what we call operational security that you want to keep. But okay, if you believe that, then where's the wreckage? All these other factors. So I'm not saying, which is a little bit of, and I think the Indian military said, like, there are costs to operations, but all pilots returned from their missions. That's a significant answer to the belief that you shot down this many different aircraft. Um, this is the world we live in. And like, you're going to make a statement like that and not provide evidence, it's going to be quickly called out and hurt your reputation, even within your own society, when the international community gets involved and says, that's weird. Maybe your people believe that, but uh, that it's easily verifiable, right? You attack the veracity of the claim.
Well, that's right. I mean, in today's age, it's difficult to hide any casualties, especially on X, we come out on social media with all the casualties paying homage to the people who sacrificed their life from the armed forces. And yes, there's a confirmation that all pilots have returned safe and they are accounted for. But John, there's been a lot of question on the ceasefire, or should I say, the understanding of ceasefire that has been achieved this time around. Now, there's been ceasefire since 2003. Then there's been another reiteration of the ceasefire in 2021. But what is different this time? Many people seem to suggest that India succumbed under US pressure and had to go for a ceasefire. Who really succumbed under pressure this time around? And why do you think that understanding of a ceasefire was achieved?
So, of course, I don't have any access to the information that you don't or anyone else. I can say with likelihood, based on the demonstration of military power that India showed, that the Indian position that it was Pakistan who said that we would like a cease in the operation is the most likely answer. Do I think that other nations like the United States was calling both sides to see if they could achieve a stop in the escalation by Pakistan? Sure. But I think the most likely is the Indian position that we were demonstrating not only the capability, but the will to continue to basically cause consequences for Pakistan's actions. And then Pakistan asked, I mean, because it wasn't just militarily, right? Even the water and the diplomatic aspects of this, the repercussions of the terrorist attack and then the military attack can all be analyzed to what's the most likely reality of that story. Pakistan, again, like we were just talking about, is going to tell their people their own story. And other people, this is why I think one of the strategic objectives achieved by India was strategic independence. They responded immediately. They communicated clearly what their goals was, and they achieved an end to the attack independently. So it's pretty decisive in that factor um, for me.
What really happens after every terror attack? One is a plausible deniability, a complete rejection that's coming from Pakistan. But one thing very frequent is that we should launch an international investigation. That's what came in after the Pahalgam terror attack as well, and that's what the Pakistani defense minister and the Pakistani government has been saying all across the international media. Now, not many know, John, that you also investigated in detail the Mumbai 2611 attacks of 2008. Please tell me, why do you think the international investigation, especially when it comes to Pakistan and with Pakistan, isn't really going to end up too well? Because it happened in 2611, it happened in Pathankot terror attack that happened a few years ago, and there has been a dead end in most of the cases. So, are you really going to believe that an international investigation supported by Pakistan is going to help?
Uh, I'm on. So, no, so at this point, you want to investigate every aspect because I would want, if I was an Indian, to know exactly how did this happen, right? So where did the operatives come from? Where did they go? How did they infiltrate? These things that are very important. So that part of the investigation, I think, is very important. To investigate the who did it, well, when the terrorist organization immediately tells you, we take responsibility for that, and we are this group, the Resistance Front, associated with Lashkar-e-Taiba, known by international investigations of the past to be
Yes.
ISI, Pakistan ISI, trained, funded, deployed to include in the 2008 Mumbai attacks. That part of the investigation is not necessary, although India being a, again, democratic society, part of the multinational organization, the world order, is going to present the evidence, the clear evidence from the April 22nd attack to the UN Security Council and show, look, but India did, which is, this is the new doctrine. It responded first. It didn't wait for investigation, which is really different, like you said, than especially 2008 when they started that, even though it was clear then, well, we'll do an international investigation and there's some plausible deniability here by Pakistan, although it wasn't then from who was talking to the ears of the terrorist. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm a fan of an investigation so that you can make sure that the event doesn't happen. And if you want, in this case, India has legitimacy. The terrorist group claimed responsibility for the October 7th attack. Pakistan attacked India. That those are all pretty clear. But I'm all for transparency though, and discovering, even if I was Indian, how we make sure, or you make sure, it doesn't happen again. Uh, there should be investigations internationally, of course, to continue to hope and to put real pressure on Pakistan to abandon this state sponsor of terror strategy that has been allowed to continue despite these investigations after the attacks on India, but other terrorist activities that it supports.
John, since we touched upon Mumbai 2611 attacks, two basic questions. Tahavur Rana came to India, a month and a half back, and that was seen as a significant statement that happened after Modi and Trump met. And also, while your investigation of Mumbai 2611 continued, did you also find the shadowy figures like Sajid Mir and Major Iqbal and others who were responsible for the attack, but kept disappearing in Pakistan? First, Pakistan said that Sajid Mir was dead, and then under FATF pressure, suddenly said that he had woken up from sleep from the dead. So, what does this again say? That are these men of the Pakistani deep state that are continue to be safeguarded, nurtured, and given protection?
Yeah. A lot of 100% all of that you just said, and from, putting somebody under house arrest, all of this conversation, although, David Headley, that was the right thing to do, aspects of that. But this was why timing was so important. The fact that India responded this time immediately, not waiting for those shadowy figures, that those state-backed, I mean, everything from the Pakistan Navy training the terrorists to do the sea operation, all those aspects, to include those individual commanders of the ISI or other elements that you're talking about. It's always that game of deployment of terrorists through this state-backed system. And then you're hoping to get those guys eventually, right? Where we've seen in other places of the world, even 40 years go by, the Marine, the terrorist attack of the Marine barracks in Lebanon, they just got one of the commanders 40 years later in the current operations. And this is why, again, the status quo of, well, you're not sure, but how India just demonstrated, which is a case study of you can respond immediately. You're not going to get every individual involved, but you can establish that new red line that no, I will respond immediately to any attack discriminately against the place where they came from, where they're trained, where they're deploying from. But you're right, getting those shadowy figures, although the investigation showed it clearly, especially when the one Mumbai attack guy didn't die and sang like a bird, was really helpful to tying those pieces of intelligence together. But you're right, getting them later always becomes a very complicated situation because you don't want to escalate, and there are, not to say there's rules of the game, but there's an aspect of proxy warfare, and then that gives this plausible deniability. And if you take a inappropriate response, then you have escalated into a different category of nation state activity.
Let's head back a little towards Operation Sindoor again, because there's one critical question that remains, John. And this is about the speculation on the social media and parts of the media as well. The CNN has reported this as well just yesterday, that India seemed to have hit at or close to some kind of a nuclear command center of Pakistan. And that's why there was some kind of a panic and either a nuclear threat or panic, and Pakistan had to succumb under pressure and come to the dialogue table. Now, over the last few days, there have been reports of some American, Egyptian, Chinese aircraft doing rounds, military aircrafts doing rounds, in Pakistan. How do you analyze this?
This is one of those areas where I look to, analysts within India to help to just to tell the real truth of this because it is confusing. And I've seen this in my work a lot where a single report that isn't really a report will then spread to this rumor of what was hit. I've seen even reports of increased radiation levels and things like that. Am I saying that India didn't attack near to show a capability to hit a
Yes.
site? Again, no. Do I know for certainty? No. When you start talking about things that are flying in the air as well, it's really hard. And this is we have a lot of people, especially on social media, that want to be the first to report a story. And news is
Yes.
really bad about it. You get online and it gets even worse. And this is where I even have to do a lot of due diligence of, did that happen? I don't know. So for that one, I'll leave it to you guys who are in the know, especially when the government they put out every site that they hit and why they hit it. So this is where you get to what I call likelihoods. Is that likely? That's this now story that somebody's put together? Maybe, but I think it's less likely than the person trying to tell a convincing story is trying to make it.
Well, yes, the Director General of Air Force Operations in India was asked this question at the press briefing, and he squarely denied that any kind of attacks took place at the Kirana Hills, that is supposedly the nuclear command center of Pakistan. But, again, uh, John, you heard at least a couple of speeches from Prime Minister Modi after the Operation Sindoor's main objective was achieved. You heard him address the nation, you heard him at the Adampur Indian Air Force Base in Punjab, and he repeatedly said that there is a new normal. And he said that Operation Sindoor continues. What do you think would be this new normal? Do you think the objectives and the dynamics of this entire heated border between India and Pakistan are going to change completely? Or do you think that this limited confrontation is perhaps going to see much more volatility in the coming months?
I don't think, well, one, the enemy always gets a vote. In this case, Pakistan gets a vote. This has been the question of, okay, what is a ceasefire and the definition of a ceasefire versus a peace agreement and other things like that. From my understanding, listening to all the statements, is to include even the presser within the military saying the ground commanders have the authority to respond to any attack. Operation Sindoor was a response to attack and a new posture of basically terrorist attack, counter-terror response that India has established. No longer will one nuclear blackmail will never be used on us like that again. Any attack by a terrorist organization will warrant an immediate response. Those are all new rules of engagement, basically, not at the tactical level, but at the national level, a new doctrine, which is while Operation Sindoor continues as in a defensive posture to respond to terrorist attack, as long as Pakistan no longer attacks India, then India will no longer be launching counterattacks against those attacks. So I see it very clearly. I understand why it's hard for people to understand. I do not think this escalates, and there are still answered, of course, in Kashmir and issues that people would love to be resolved. That wasn't the goal of Operation Sindoor. This is why I think the Prime Minister's immediate clarity was, again, comprehensive, as in we were attacked, we responded, a new doctrine has been established that will be the one going forward. So hopefully that deters the sending of terrorists or Pakistan military attacks. But the enemy gets a vote. So that's why you can't say the operation is completely over, because tomorrow there could be an attack and then you have to respond to it. So I see it clearly. Uh, but this is where other people, again, analysts are trying to say like the goals should have been much larger. And I kind of I view this very refreshing strategic clarity important in a military operation that has such great risk for escalation, for much more loss of life on both sides, but a clear stance of this is what we're going to do going forward.
John, in this confrontation, the Indian Air Force also came out with images of the Chinese rockets or missiles, especially PL-15, and the Turkish drones that were used and perhaps are still being used to either create psychological warfare, some kind of a panic, or some kind of a surveillance that's happening in bordering Indian states. What does this say about the help, defense, and equipment's help that is coming in from particularly Turkey and China for Pakistan? Do you think this is going to continue? Because this is not a normal kind of a confrontation. This is based on terror attacks that have taken place. And what does this say?
Yeah, yeah, and this is where it's hard to draw the line in Pakistan. What is support of terrorism and what is support of military capabilities? And that, the foreign military sales are basically who provides the technologies and the videos that governments like this will put out trying to demonstrate strength. Look, the things that exploded are the thing that should really be mattering in both offensive capability. What did your all those videos? What did all that equipment do offensively, and what did it do defensively? That's what should matter. Those are the results that matter. But this is the psychological warfare, like you're saying, of trying to put out the videos showing your people in fancy uniforms launching fancy equipment. Like the results don't lie. India invested heavily, Pakistan invested heavily. One side showed military superiority. Will that continue? Absolutely. The other Pakistan will continue to buy Russian, Chinese, Turkish equipment, trying to view strength within itself. And this India can't rest on what its capability it demonstrated this time, because there were lessons learned here by not just Pakistan, but even China and others who see their equipment failing or not. And that this is the continuing, what I say, all warfare is asymmetric, because you're always trying to not play to your enemy's strength and find basically a decisive advantage.
One final question, John. You have obviously observed this for a very long time, in particular, Pakistan sponsored terrorism and Kashmir. I want you to comment on Pakistan Army. Asim Munir, he's been at the center of all this. When there was Bajwa as the Pakistan Army chief, there was a ceasefire that was announced between India and Pakistan in 2021. But that ceasefire seems to have completely gone into the dustbin of history now, unfortunately. But how do you see Asim Munir? How do you see this kind of somebody who's known as a jihadi general, if I may put it that way, who's very radical, who believes in his Islamist beliefs and tells his soldiers that you're fighting for a cause, and that cause is Islam, and you have to wage a jihad against India. And he says that Allah is on your side and not on side of India. Such is the kind of radicalization and extremism that is at the very top of the Pakistan army. So, do you think he's going to change? Because he seemed to be the mastermind behind Pahalgam terror attack and the confrontation that happened with India. Uh, do you feel he's going to change, or to get control in a deeply divided Pakistan, will he continue to impose this proxy war or terrorism on India?
I don't think it'll change, to be honest. You probably know more about the history of the individual than I do. My cursory in knowing many individuals like him, that radicalization isn't easily changed. And while India did decisively achieve all these strategic goals, you, some of that is basically, like you said, fundamental radicalization of individuals that are not just at the very top, but within the organization. So it would take an institutional change. Um, my number one answer to him is problematic, right? All those statements very problematic, and even what the world wants to see within Pakistan's government and military, and we've even seen since April 22nd, since his attack, almost like a mini coup as they're firing individuals as they figure out within themselves that's not stability, right? We want stability. We want good neighbors. We want peace. We don't want backing of terrorism. But if you're saying those things and you're within the actual supposedly non-terrorist part of your institution, that's really problematic. And that instability within whether it's a civilian-led military or a military-led government is also hard to determine oftentimes with Pakistan. And India showed, in this case, what civilian leadership over the military looks like. And that's stability, that's control. And when you have that instability in an individual like that and in other elements of the military, it's not good. And it takes a lot to deter that. But this is why it's never one factor, right? Pakistan now, as a society, as a military, a government, gets to make their decisions on where they want to start their path. India is now very clear that it's not the old war we're fighting, it's preparing for the next war, and this is a new India. Now Pakistan gets to make those decisions within itself, and we can be hopeful. I can say that.
One comment, John, I just remembered that you briefly touched upon misinformation, and we are increasingly living in the times of information warfare. Now, there are, misinformations and, unfortunately, fake news that comes in from all corners, from India as well as in Pakistan. But do you think that with India, within the fog of war, it does happen and it is busted? But do you think in Pakistan, this misinformation or disinformation is institutionalized disinformation that's coming in, particularly from the Pakistan army?
Of course, absolutely, and that immediate response to try to put out misinformation to which was interesting in especially in this case how quick they were to try to put misinformation out and many people this is the problem in the world we live in as well is now you have a megaphone, right? Because of algorithm driven social media, those lies spread faster than they ever did. And we've seen this in other areas. And Pakistan tried to ride on that, but failed. But I do actually believe, from my understandings within the Pakistan society, there is actual counter narratives to that. Not saying it's a free press, but that's what you want to see as well. As in, even within the society, like, I don't think that's right. They may be silent, but this is the danger, and again, why this is a very unique, interesting case study as how quick India was to put out for everyone, to include the Pakistan society, their information, their evidence, their all of it. And when you only put out a lie, like we just said, it really matters. But it was seemed to be the doctrine of the response to the situation: plausible deniability, put out lies, provide no evidence, and hope that it works. It started to work, and I think you saw that, and you had credible news organizations saying, "Well, this is what they're saying." Like, okay, but you got to do some due diligence fact checking, which is a problem that is a very big problem we're seeing in war in other areas of governments right now. Yes, I think they're going to keep doing that but this, like what you do and others, this immediately basically addressing it is how you try to counter this. And I've told people this in other wars of where you believe that misinformation is just so much and can spread so quickly. Actually, the silent majority can push and not become silent and push back against the lies.
Well, John Spencer, you did speak in detail, and I'm sure for the audience, this is much brighter and a better contextual understanding of what really happened between India and Pakistan. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. Same.
Thank you.